Hello, today we'll be talking about the integration of literature-based reading instruction. We'll look at the definition, what the research says. There's a short video by Dr. Andy with some good pointers and tips and examples. And then we'll look at what a lesson could look like with some examples, activity examples, and that'll be it. So literature-based reading instruction is using literature to teach reading. It's as simple as that. You know, a good YA novel for your older students, a good children's book, you know, using what the students like. Research shows that students develop literacy skills by having real-life literacy experiences with support from more experienced individuals. They become better readers, writers, and thinkers. And Bond says there are numerous ways professionals who work with children and young adults can help them make connections with literature. There's not just one set way. And really, my small group lessons and larger group lessons tend to incorporate many different things from all over. We do have a short video by Dr. Andy.
Andy.
Okay, what happened?
Johnson. Today we're looking at an approach to reading instruction called a literature-based approach, and it's simply a matter of using children's books, great children's books, as the basis for reading instruction instead of those very expensive basal manuals in which the stories generally are mush. Now there's two basic approaches. The whole class can read the same book, or you can have students be put into small groups and create book clubs where each group reads the same book. You're limited only by your imagination here, of course. In a literature-based approach, you create your own post-reading activities. You do not need to rely on someone outside your classroom who does not know you or your students. You have all these sorts of activities that you can use: creative writing, thinking, art, drama, etc., etc. And as teachers, we have our toolboxes full of pedagogical strategies. And if you've read my other books or other videos, you know that there are hundreds and hundreds of good pedagogical strategies that you can use. The goal of the post-reading activity is for students to interact with the ideas that they encounter in the book and to interact with each other, social interaction. This is why we have post-reading activities, not to see if they've read the book. It enables the class to become the book, to have a whole class discussion around the book. When you are reading Stuart Little, the class becomes Stuart Little. And you can even create Stuart Little or mouse experiments, or mouse, or study mice or rodents in science. You see how it becomes the curriculum. You can create related lessons in social studies, health, science, math, etc., etc. It becomes the curriculum. Now, when you're using literature-based, what you usually want to do in your daily lesson is create some sort of advanced organizer to prepare students to read. And all these things here are examples of advanced organizers. An advanced organizer is a graphic organizer put in advance of a lesson or a story. You can also use story previews, which are not technically an advanced organizer. Well, I guess they could be. Yep. Here's a story map that could be used as an advanced organizer. You want to create some sort of reading schedule for when you're going to read each chapter of the book. If you're reading a common book, generally classes you read one chapter a day. So when you're selecting a book for a literature-based approach, you want to find a book in which one chapter can be read in a day or in a reading class. What about students who get done early and do you let them read ahead? Well, of course, you decide. I always hate to put limits on literacy, so I tend to allow them to read ahead in the story. Some teachers say, stop after chapter 8, don't read ahead. Well, that's a matter of personal taste and how you design your instruction. But what then do you do if a student finishes early and you don't want that student to read ahead? Well, you could have other books by the same author for them to read, other books on the same subject or genre, or simply read other books. All things, because reading is good. What about low ability readers if you have a multi-level classroom? And by the way, all classrooms are multi-level. There's no such thing as a homogeneous group of students. You can have chapters on tape, use that outline or advanced organizer so they get a sense of the structure. Chapter synopsis allow the students to get as much as he or she can. And remember, the purpose of reading narrative text is to enjoy the story. So you do whatever you can to enable that student to enjoy the story. Now, instead of those very expensive workbooks, use a reading log or a journal. 89 cents at Walmart. Buy a notebook and use it for aesthetic responses. They're responding to the story. Or as a journal for class discussion. What interesting and important things did you discover? Discussion groups. Class discussion can occur in a group or in large group. Here's an example of a dialogue journal, by the way. And I like using these. This is where the student responds and then the teacher responds to a response. So it creates a dialogue. That's one way to use a journal. Or a reading log. I like students to have a log in the front or back of their notebook. Simply have the story and what they're reading. Adopt and adapt. Double journal entry. This is for older students. This is another idea for using journals. They record something that actually happened in the text and then their ideas on one side. The activities used with your reading log or journal, you are limited only by your imagination. The benefits, of course, it's real authentic reading like we do in the real world. Costs much less than basal books and manuals. And instead of spending that money on basal books and manuals, you can have actually really good books that students want to read. And it gives you flexibility in terms of book, genre, and subject areas. You know what books your students enjoy, not the basal manual. They don't know what books your students enjoy. And the stories are generally much more interesting than those found in basals. Now, what about all those so very important skills in the scope and sequence chart or on the list of Common Core state standards? Well, they're not all that important, but you can still teach them. You can have mini lessons, including lots of reading practice to actually use and apply those skills. And you can teach and have them use them in journals in learning logs. For example, if I was teaching the short A, I would have students describe about a time when they were mad. So I'm seeing their use of that in a journal or a reading log. And by the way, you can still use worksheets. That doesn't mean you can't use them. When I use worksheets, I like to tear them out and have two students work on a worksheet together. The purpose is for it to be a learning tool. The conversation that takes place enhances learning. So how do you organize this? Well, first you find a good book, and if you enjoy it, chances are students will enjoy it. You read the book, and then you create activities to go with each chapter ahead. And again, the activities are to manipulate, extend, or experience the chapter ideas in some way. Decide on the approach that you're going to use for reading and the reading schedule. And then you may need to differentiate for high and low ability readers. Now, you can use this across the curriculum. Yes, in science and social studies. First, you find a good book, you read it, and you record ideas related to the content area, science, social studies, or health. For example, reading Hatchet, there's a lot of good ideas about the environment and science and such things, all right? You need to do a little research, get some information, create an outline, and develop the content that you want to teach that goes with each chapter. And then you create activities and assignments for each chapter, and you link to the standards. Yes, This takes a little more work up front, but once you create this, you have this to use for several years. And actually, when students are interested and enjoy it, it's actually much less work in the long run. It takes a little more work up front, but the rewards are great, and students actually like it. Teachers' number one job is helping children fall in love with books. After that, much of reading instruction takes care of itself. Literature-based approach to reading instruction.
Okay, for some reason my Canva will not present again. Right in the middle of my video, of course. That's okay, we can just continue on from here. Give it another second. Okay. So that was Dr. Andy. He has some really good ideas. And like he said, this can be for a whole group. This can be for a small group. My preference is small group. Of course, I've been a special ed teacher, and pulling out my group or the low ability readers, that's kind of been my thing. So some ways you can do this, we have a lot of different words for the same thing. Literature circles, book clubs, literacy groups, kind of all doing the same thing here. We've got our book, we're reading it, we're talking about it, we're doing work
Andy Johnson, with it. We're talking about teaching narrative writing today here. I'm talking about it.
And of course, Andy Johnson had to start back up again. Nothing can be easy. So, let's let my computer... Okay, some key points we have that I like to remember is students need to be reading. We need to set aside time for students to read. If we don't make it a point to give them time to read, they're not going to make it a point to read. So I like to give them, a chance to read independently. I'm there if they need help. I also like to do, kind of send them off in corners and have them read out loud and then me listen to them. See, where maybe they need some pointers at for their fluency. Just, I like to read aloud to them. I like for them to read aloud to me. We do it different. Every day we do something different on the reading. Everything doesn't have to be graded. I know this is hard when we need grades in our, upper grade classes, but my students always said their favorite thing about coming to my room to read is they didn't have to worry about a grade. We were there to read, we had fun with it, we talked about it, and we just enjoyed it. Figure out another way maybe for your grades that you need, of course, comprehension quizzes, the final products, effort, that's a struggle right there, the grades. I know it is. We do have to offer support. You can't just give them a book, go read, here's a Google form to fill out. They need support. They need discussion with us. And again, then that's the next point. Discussion's important. We're there. This is supposed to be, enjoyment. Reading, talking about it. They're learning how to talk to peers. They're just learning how to discuss things as a group. There's lots more going on here than just reading. And then, of course, differentiation. This one's very important to me from being the special ed teacher. That's why I like the small group. I can pull the book that's on their level, give them the support they need. However, I've worked with teachers too and been in the classroom and done collaboration with them when they did the whole group. We work together. You can find a lot of books on YouTube for the students to listen to. I was there to offer support. If they were doing a chapter, that might be my part, is I pull that group out and help them get their chapter read, and then they go back, and do, the group discussion, the project, just whatever needs to be done there so the kids are successful. This is kind of how I like to set up my weekly lesson plan, and this is for a small group. I like things to go and be done in 1 week. Not necessarily the whole book, but, whatever I've got going on that week. Whatever standards I'm working on, I like it all kind of be wrapped up in a week. My project, especially if I'm doing a project, I just like for it to be done in a week. That doesn't always work, but this is kind of how I do it. Mondays, of course, we're reading. If I'm in say kindergarten, first, second, and we're doing a book that we can read the whole book in 1 day, then we read the whole book in 1 day. We discuss it. I have a project we can do in 1 day. We kind of are on a daily thing. Or not necessarily a daily thing, but we might do something different each day with 1 book. First day we might do a book, a picture walk. The second day we might do vocabulary. I kind of spread it out a little different. This one's more for like reading a chapter a day, like Dr. Andy was talking about. So, of course, read. Get your chapter read. Then group discussion. What's happening in the book. Questions students might have. Get started on the project for the week. Every day, of course, we're reading. Some sort of discussion. You could bring in your journal entries there. Vocabulary. I like to include Q&A questions that are related to whatever standards I'm teaching that week. It could be something about the plot line, something about setting, character development, just something to get the kids going so they can kind of quiz each other and we can get our discussion going and still relate it to our standards. And then Friday, I like to present our projects we've worked on, let the students present them what they've done. If it's been a whole group project, we might present it to another group. And just reflections for the week. A few activity examples. You could have text-based drawings, character silhouettes. I love the character silhouettes, and you can find those. I'm not an artsy person, so I have to look on Teachers Pay Teachers, but there's usually one on there for every book you can think of. The kids love them. They look cool hung up. Very interesting. But we've got literary postcards, of course, dioramas, word art, all kinds of, the sky's the limit here. Like you said, if you can think it, it's going to be okay. Some things to think about when developing your lesson is, have it pre-planned. Know what standards you want to work on that week. Have your learning goals, your objectives. Let kids know what you're learning about. That, you've got your literature, of course, you're reading, but you've got other things going on. Unfortunately, we have so much to cover these days, we have to cover standards. We can't just leave those out. Make sure your instruction is clear and focused. Make sure kids know what's going on. Clear directions. Make sure and monitor your progress, and this is somewhat where you can get some of your grades. Kids just don't have to maybe know they're being monitored. Sometimes they're reading and I might be doing a running record if I've told them to read out loud and they don't even know it. But just make sure you know what's going on, what's working, what's not working. And then as a practice activity for teachers, choose a book. It can be a children's book or a YA novel. Develop a 4-day lesson plan, sort of like the one I showed you. Include your questions for the week to guide discussion, a project they could be working on, important vocabulary words from the chapters that week, and be sure and connect it to the standards. And then here's my references. Thank you so much for listening. I will say the Literary Maven down here, her website is full, just chock full of great activities. She has really cool stuff on there. So you may want to be sure and check her out.